Definitely shouldn't be oil there. Hey, what's going on, guys? As you can see by the intro, we have a valve cover gasket leaking into the spark plug tubes, causing a misfire. So now we're going to go over the tools needed to do this repair. Shop towels, brake parts cleaner, various 3/8 ratchets, a couple various 1/4" drive ratchets, a long and short 10mm 1/4" drive, a 10mm wobble socket, and a 7mm 1/4" drive socket, various 1/4" drive extensions. You need a short and long 15mm 3/8 drive sockets, along with a short 10 and long 10 3/8 sockets, various 3/8 drive extensions, and then you'll see why you need this super long one. I also used a 3/8 to 1/4" socket adapter. Need a pair of pliers or some kind of hose clamp pliers. Need a trim tool, trim release tool, flat blade screwdriver. You may need some sort of pick to release electrical connectors if you cannot get them to come off by hand. You'll need some sort of 3/8 fuel line disconnect tool, 15mm, 10mm, 8mm wrenches or ratchet wrenches if you can get them. And finally, for tools, a extendable magnet, because some of the bolts, when you're taking them out, you may drop them. So this is definitely a must. And to go along with the shop towels and the brake clean, also some kind of just nylon bristle brush for scrubbing and cleaning the valve cover and any parts that you take off that you want to clean. First step, disconnect your battery. It is an 8mm wrench or 5/16. Next step, we're going to remove the PCM. 7mm bolts hold the connectors in. Once these are off, then you have two 10mm bolts and two 10mm nuts. Once all four of those are off, just slide it off the studs, just like that. We're going to remove this bracket. We need to disconnect the AC line from it. It's a 10mm bolt. And then we'll take a trim tool and get that popped up off of there. Then, as you can see, that is free. Then a deep 15mm and an extension, and actually behind here, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's actually a bolt right there, and that's a 15mm. Can you see it? Alright, we're going to have to loosen these two bolts. Kind of getting bound up a little bit. You see it's starting to move. Now we'll see. Yep. There's the one from behind. And then take the remaining two out. And then the bracket will slide right out. Alright, next we're going to take the belt off of the alternator. We don't need to take it completely off, but we're just going to take it off the alternator since it has to come out. So your tensioner's here. A 3/8 ratchet or a serpentine belt tool will work. Slide in there and it goes towards the driver's side. And then we'll just pull the belt off the alternator and then release tension and just leave it like that. All right, next we're going to remove the alternator. There's a 15mm bolt down at the bottom, and you stick your hand on there, you'll feel it right away. It's pretty easy to feel, kind of hard to get on camera. And then there's two 15s up here. So we'll start with the one on the bottom. There it is. And the AC line will kind of get in the way. So actually what works better is if you get like the 1-inch extension, that's a wobble extension. That way you can have it a little bit of an angle to get past the AC line. Now once the bottom one's out, we'll get these top two 15s out. And once you got them loose, they should walk out by hand. You might have to take the alternator itself and just kind of wiggle it to get the weight off of the bolts. Now that the bolts are out, you can tilt the alternator forward. There's one electrical connector. Just use a screwdriver to release the tab and then work it out like that. And then behind this black boot is where the battery cable hooks up. That goes to the battery to charge it. That is a 10mm. Break it free and then it should come off by hand. Once that's off, slide the battery cable off and then go and just put the nut loosely back on the alternator. And then it's a little bit of a tight fit. Snake the alternator up and out. Now we're going to take off the upper air box. There's a 10mm bolt here and one here at the back. Then you have two hose clamps to loosen. Pull that one off. Then as you're pulling this up, there's a hose here. Just make sure it comes off of the valve cover. And just wiggle it off the throttle body, just like that. Now we're going to take out this 10mm fastener that's holding the AC line and the dipstick tube to the cylinder head, just to give us more room. Alright. That's off. This will slide off so it has more movement. Now, start disconnecting the electrical connectors. We have one here, which I shouldn't move like that, but it's for the valve timing solenoid. Cam sensor up front. Alright, this one I cannot get to come off. I don't know why. I've released the tab, like it should come off. I don't know if somebody else at one point had put some kind of sealant or something in it. So instead of risking breaking that, that goes into the head itself, so we can actually take the whole harness and kind of move it forward to get the valve cover off. So instead of breaking it, we're going to leave that one go. Next one is going to be this. That'll just pull it like that, pull the tab up, disconnect, and then these clips here, you can just get under there and pop them free. And this one, I don't know if you'll be able to see, goes down to the oil pressure sending unit. down by where the oil filter goes on. So that's what we're going to disconnect now. Now we're going to disconnect the air pump valve for emissions. And then we have one connector here to undo, and then go and unplug all 6 ignition coils. There's all those. Unplug the throttle body and your map sensor. Actually, let's do that with that one. Now, like that, if they break, it's all right. Once you put everything back together, that'll stay. Now we will take the AC line, kind of get it up out of the way without bending it. Take the whole harness and fold it forward. Now we're going to disconnect the, I think that's for the PCV there. All right, you can see on this line, the way it disconnects is, you can actually see how it kind of gets smaller on the inside. You pull the tab towards the hose and then push it down, and then it'll slide off the pipe. Now we're going to take off the brake booster vacuum hose. There are pliers. Make it a little bit easier to get to. You can twist them a little bit. I think just kind of wiggle it until it's off. And then we'll actually take that and twist it up and out of the way. And then now, we're going to take off the fuel line. Take a screwdriver, pop the security clip off. That way, we can get the fuel line off. Then take its 3/8. Take a quick disconnect tool, slide in there, and you can feel when it fully seats. It's like that. And watch your eyes because you might spray some fuel out. Alright, now we're going to take this bracket off. We need to remove this bolt that holds the wiring to it. That'll go off of there. We have the front differential breather tube. Pop that off. That off. That one off. And that one. The PCM harnesses are out of the way. Pop that off, and then the fuel line. Pop up and off. Out of the way like that, and then finally, but you are not going to be able to see it very well, if at all, there's actually a 10mm bolt down at the bottom of the intake. Bolt. And then now, you can actually take the bracket. Gonna have to get around some of the stuff that's in the way, but work it a little bit, and the bracket is off. All right, now we're to the point where we can take the intake manifold off. There's 10 bolts. It alternates 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, all the way back. The biggest pain in the butt bolt, besides the one in the back, is the one here. There's a hose that is really stiff, and every one I've tried to take off breaks. So I found if you use they're 10mm bolts, use a decently long extension and a 1/4 inch socket. You can kind of just flex the hose out of the way to get to the hidden bolt. And that's usually the one I start with. That way I'm not fighting the manifold trying to fall. And I usually go a little overkill and make sure that I know that bolt was all the way out before. Remove just like that. All right, for that last bolt back in the back, the firewall, there's rear, I believe they're the heater hoses. All that is going to make it a word that I can't say because I'm trying to keep this channel friendly. So what we figured out to get that one out is crap load extension is probably 2 foot or so, a 10 millimeter wobble extension, and what we actually did was went from the driver wheel well up through here, up this way to the bolt. You can actually reach down up top with smaller hands and feel the bolt, and once you're on it, break it free and you can spin her right out. Now that all 10 of the bolts are loose, take the intake away from the engine, kind of wiggle it around some of the hoses, and then slowly walk it out like that. And this is the bolt that was a pain. Those hoses literally run right there, so, and that's packed way back against the firewall. Now we're going to take out the ignition coils. Now number 4, we'll take that one out first. This is why we're changing the valve cover gasket. If you look down in there, there's oil is all the way up to where the valve cover gasket ring goes around that spark plug hole. It definitely should not have oil in there. The reason this thing had a misfire, this coil is junk, so we're going to replace all 6 spark plugs and just this coil after we replace the valve cover gasket. So now we're going to pull all 6 of these coils out. Number 1, soaked in oil. So I'm going to just set them like this. Then once they're all out, 2 is fine. The reason I'm placing the coil on 4 is just because, no, that one's got oil in it too. Number 4, obviously we know that one's junk. Somebody should just throw that one away now. Number 5 might have a touch at the very bottom. And number 6 is completely covered. All right, before we go any further, we need to clean out the oil that's in these holes because we don't want to pull a spark plug oil down in there and potentially hydrolock the motor. So you can use, this is like a vacuum pump, an air operated vacuum pump, or you can use like a turkey baster, just something, but we need to suck out this oil. So just like that, and then just do the remaining cylinders that have oil in them. Now that we're here, all we gotta do is take out, I believe there's 21 10 millimeter bolts that hold the valve cover down. So we're gonna get all of those out. And you drop cans of stuff. The valve cover should pull straight up. If it doesn't want to come off, if it's stuck, you can get like your trim tool, kind of shove it underneath, and then you can just kind of just start getting the seal to break around it. But at this point, pull it up, and the easiest way is to go under the AC line and just kind of work it forward. Just like that. All right, while you're cleaning off the valve cover gasket and all the dirt, we're going to go ahead and swap out the spark plugs. It's kind of easier when it's this way. You don't have the gaskets, or the valve cover stands up about that tall, so this is a lot easier to get to them. We're going to swap those out and then also clean wherever the gasket goes on the cylinder head. All right, new spark plugs are in. Those are torqued to 15 foot-pounds. And then when you install the cam cover gaskets, they'll actually kind of snap in, hold themselves into the openings. Alright, one thing we found out putting it back on is you can actually pull this AC line enough that you can actually drop it straight on. A little bit issue with the gasket wanting to stay in the groove, so we obviously didn't record putting it on, but it's on, it's lined up. I got a couple of the bolts snugged down, so we're going to snug the rest of them down. Then once they're all snugged down, they get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. All right, once cam cover's on, we're going to put on the ignition coils. We're putting the new one on number 1, since once everything is fully installed, this is kind of the hardest one to do, so we know this cylinder shouldn't have a problem probably for the rest of the life of the vehicle. So we'll snug these down as well, and they get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. All right, we got the intake sat down where it kind of goes, so we'll get it up. Then they always start these bolts by hand. That way if you're at a weird angle, it doesn't cross thread. That one started. And these bolts will get torqued to 89 inch-pounds. All right, intake is on and torqued down. Now we're going to install the bracket. Over here. Pop this clip back off. I just put it back on the fuel line so we didn't lose it. All right, now that stuff over there is kind of done, minus the PCM. Put this harness back under the AC line. So you can have all your, and that literally just sits down next to the valve cover. And just connect all your coils. Connect this one at the back. Connect your secondary air injection valve. Go ahead and hook up that PCV hose. Put the harness in its clip. Connect the throttle body. The map sensor. That'll go all the way down to the oil pressure sensor. This one is for the O2 sensor. That on there, and then that clips in. Get that out of the way for now. This one goes to the cam actuator solenoid. All right, we got the AC line on the stud first, followed by the engine oil dipstick tube. And then put it down. I had to put it to 89 inch-pounds. There's really no torque spec for it, but it's not going to go anywhere. Now we're going to hop over and put the alternator back on. All right, now the alternator's installed. We're going to install the bracket / engine lift point. Pull the AC line out. You want to get it behind it before you put it on, because the AC line will not move enough to get back around it. So we'll start all 3 of the bolts before we run them down. We got the bolt, we got it lined up, so all right, we got the belt back on. It's routed properly, and if you forgot how it routes on the belt or on the fan shroud, it actually shows the belt diagram for the engine, so you always have that to go by. Now we're going to install the engine control module. So you want it to go where kind of this gap here faces down. So we'll slide it on the studs. Start the bolts. Start the nuts, and then everything gets tightened down to 89 inch-pounds. Now we're going to reconnect the connectors. They will only go in one way. If you look at a connector here, they have these little extrusions on the side. They're all different. They'll only line up to one of these openings. But blue goes closer to the vehicle, and then gray, and then white. Now we're going to hook up the brake booster vacuum line. Just twist it back around. When you kind of get that started, then you can take your pliers, shove it all the way on, and let off. Now we're going to install the upper air intake. Once you get that started, make sure you hook up this hose as you're pushing it down. Make sure it goes on the valve cover like that. All right. Last thing, finally, reconnect your battery. We're going to start with the positive first, and then the negative.